Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metuchen High School Pawdcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Kalegi, joined by Josh Hyman and Terracina, and we've got a great guest today. We are joined by Metuchen Mayor Jonathan Busch. Mayor Busch, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Eddie, Sarah, Josh. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on your show.
So the first thing I just wanted to talk to you about, before we get into your mayor duties and everything in town, is just you as a father in town. Just how has you and your family been able to deal with everything going on right now? I saw on your Twitter how you guys have been celebrating Passover just virtually, how everything's had to change this year, things have had to be put on hold. So how have you and your family been dealing with this?
Yeah, listen, it's no different than anyone else. It's hard, right? We're all kept up in our homes. Occasionally we get a chance to take a walk or a bike ride. I got some exercise this morning on my bike that I have in my house. But it's very different. We're all doing our best to cope. Many people, not everyone of course, but many people are having to work from home. Certainly you all as students have to work from home, and my three boys who are at three of Metuchen's 4 schools, they are in a position where they are all having to work from home. And so you're managing schoolwork with the kids, although, when they get to be your age, it's a little easier. As they're younger, they need a little bit more assistance. And then, of course, I've got the duties with respect to the borough. And we have taken very proactive positions with respect to the coronavirus. So probably similar in all ways, right? We're active in all areas of our lives. And so that lends itself to being proactive professionally, whether it be at my office or whether it be with respect to governing the borough.
Yeah, and let's talk about governing the borough a bit. Obviously, this has been stressful for any official. And one thing you had to do that I saw last week was your public statement about enforcing social distancing, especially among us students. How have you seen an improvement? Have you seen an improvement since then in terms of people abiding by the social distancing principles?
Yeah, I've been kind of wondering whether my son's friends will ever speak to me again after I issue that statement. But look, the borough, before I get into that, I'll say the borough has taken some pretty significant steps to ensure social distancing, to make sure that we have, procedures and processes in place to make sure that we keep this community as safe as possible. One of the biggest outliers in that, because we've noticed that most people are following the guidance that we've issued. Most people. The people who we found that were following it the least were some middle and high school students. And so in the process of trying to figure out what to do as spring break approached, I had a number of conversations with our superintendent of schools, Dr. Caputo. I know he was on your show previously. I had a number of conversations with our chief of police, our head of emergency management. And we were trying to figure out a way just to really make sure that people understand, and not just the kids, but their parents understand the importance of what we're supposed to be doing right now to make sure that we are safe. And yes, it's a difficult time, but there's a lot of silver lining here. I wanted to ask you all some questions about what you've been doing during this time. There are still ways, and I know if you had told me this a couple months ago, I may not have agreed with myself now, but there are still ways that we can all have fun, even if we're kept up in our house.
Yeah, so, I'll start with this. It's been difficult to adjust, but, having this time obviously we've been working on our schoolwork and stuff, but I've been able to, work on other stuff, spend more time with my family. Obviously, I'm a junior in high school. I've been really busy with everything else between, driver's license, SATs, AP classes. It's a hassle, but right now, having this little opportunity, a little bit of a break to work on other things, that's been really one of the good things that has come out of this. Obviously, having to pause everything has been tough, but trying to maintain a level of normalcy and just trying to keep up with trying different things and just trying to keep up and just keep life going. I'll move this over to Josh. How have you been doing, being at home?
I've been doing all right. Pretty much what Eddie said. I've just been really taking a break from my schoolwork, and I have to be a bit careful because my sleep schedule is a bit messed up now. And having to go back to classes on Monday is going to be interesting because I have to go back to as if I were going to school. But yeah, like Eddie said, it's been a good thing to have this break just to relax a bit, catch up on other things I want to do. I get to talk to my friends outside of town now. I get to, hang out with my friends over, video call, FaceTime, playing video games with them. So, it hasn't been that hard to just keep in touch with my friends over social distancing. But I think just, maintaining a regular schedule is a bit tricky.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, how about you?
I was just gonna say, it's not that terrible. It's just kind of sad because you don't know when you're gonna be able to see your friends again. And I had a question about that for the mayor, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So when we finally return to with schools being open and with businesses being open, what are some restrictions that will still be in place as we ease back into normalcy, or will it just be all at once everyone goes back to normal, or is there a procedure for that we should be aware of?
Right. So that's a really great question. By the way, before I even get into those answers, I admire all of you. I mean, I never had to go through. Of course, I didn't have the connection through cell phones and video games. I mean, I played video games, but we couldn't connect to each other. We would play in our own rooms and call each other and say, "What level did you get to?" That's about the limit of our interaction virtually. But I commend you for going through something that has got to be incredibly difficult. I mean, you're all at different. You're all juniors. Sarah, you're a senior.
I'm a senior.
So Eddie and Josh, you're juniors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another year, but Sarah, this is going to be tremendously difficult for you and for your classmates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just tell you that. So I admire all of you for doing your part. It's really important. But I'll tell you, Sarah, that to answer your question, the short answer is we don't know. Okay. The more likely sort of what we're seeing, and based on some of the research and the science and policy that's coming out of both Washington and Trenton, is that this would be an ease back into life as we knew it, right? That we would never have a one day, we won the war kind of, everybody's out in the street, and you've got that picture of the famous picture of the sailor and the woman kissing in Times Square. I don't think we're going to have an event like that. It'd be fun to all go out and party all at once and be able to reclaim our normal freedoms. But I think it's going to be a gradual ease. I think the first step we're going to see is some of the least contact type of activities. Activities are going to sort of ease back gradually, and then over time, we will find that that all of the activities will be resumed. But we were talking yesterday during Passover, and I was seeing my nephew who's 3 years old, and we've had conversations, for example, with his mother about the way that he views germs, and it's amazing to think about answering the question of will we ever really be the same. Our activities will go back to normal at some point. At some point, we'll be able to go back to school. We'll be able to be in class with each other. We'll be able to go to concerts and sporting events, and life will resume. But the question becomes, do you stop washing your hands? Yes, maybe not as often, but you're going to think twice before you do that. And I wonder if we're raising an entire generation now of germaphobes, and maybe with good reason. But, I was not one of those people who used to wash my hands all the time. I wasn't one of these people who would carry around sanitizer. But I think I'll think twice now before not doing that type of thing in view of what we've now been exposed to.
Do you have any ideas for a sort of post ceremony that will honor the achievements of the senior class if we don't return to school in time for a full prom graduation thing?
Yeah, so I think, and obviously this is not my decision. The Board of Education makes those decisions with the superintendent of schools and its administration, but I would certainly, if possible, without putting any particular pressure on those people, because I don't think they would necessarily take it well, but I think it's important for you to have some sort of closure to your time in the Metuchen Public Schools, and so I would absolutely favor some sort of program. Again, whatever the borough can do to support you all who've been through a lot and have had a lot taken from you. There are people who have way less than we do in the world, but that doesn't make it any easier to absorb the fact that this has been a very trying end of your third and maybe fourth marking period and the end of your time in the Metuchen Public Schools. Did you start at Moss, Sarah?
Yeah.
Not all the way. So not going back to school will be no way to finish in Metuchen. So hopefully they do something to honor you all.
Yeah, we definitely just want like even like a week with our friends, just like at the very end.
I'm sure you'll have something. I'm sure you'll have something this summer, somehow, some way. But again, every step that's taken to bring people back together is going to be based on what is available in terms of research. And, you know, in Metuchen, we took these steps, again, I said proactively before, we took these steps in many ways before many other communities did. And we closed down our stores before other places did. We made sure that we implemented social distancing earlier with respect to our borough employees and the manner in which our emergency officials acted. And so I would imagine we'll be proactive with respect to the resuming activity as well. But we're never going to put people at risk, and we're going to be really careful in the way that we do it.
What would you say is like the acceptable level of risk that we're willing to take? Because it's not going to be zero, obviously, but like, when will we say like it's not like when like you know like the flatten the curve thing? When will we say that we flattened it enough and it's safe enough for us to start to go back out?
I think the key is listening to the experts. I mean, everybody's talking about Dr. Fauci, right, from the federal government, and you know we get guidance from the CDC, and I think the most important thing is that we listen to the people who know what they're talking about. I don't understand medical science, public health that well, other than, you know, the way that anybody understands this stuff, the way it's broadcast in the news. But the flatten the curve aspect is not necessarily mean, as I understand it, that fewer people get sick. It means that you spread out the period of time when people get sick over a longer period of time, so as to ensure that our health system, our healthcare system, our hospitals, our doctors' offices are able to keep up with the number of needs that patients who end up becoming diagnosed with COVID-19, they can provide them with the support they need. So it's hard to answer your question what the acceptable level of risk is. Obviously, you want to be as close to zero as possible, but you want to see what your options. When you're in a position like I am, and one day, God willing, all of you will be, right? Assuming you want to be. You'll be, but in any sort of leadership position, you've got people's livelihoods, and in some cases, I mean, things got really real now with respect to this illness, because you've got maybe certainly their safety and their health, but certainly, at this point, you're realizing maybe their lives are potentially in your hands. Where, if you make decisions, you can actually be saving people's lives. And so you hope that whatever steps we take maximize the potential for saving as many lives as possible.
Definitely.
Sorry, one more question. One of my friends was asking if you know anything about the spring street fair or like those like small market type things. I know it's like a small thing in like the grand scheme, but she was just wondering.
Yeah, I think that all activities in the borough are going to be close. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone in the Arts Commission about scheduling some of the arts events, and Melissa Perlstein, who is our new borough administrator, who started, by the way, about a week or two before this whole thing started. Imagine. And she's doing great. I mean, what a crash course in organizational administration, just learning about who you need to know, who you can trust, who you can work with, all those kinds of things. She's learning that, obviously, in a hurry, and she's done a phenomenal job. But Melissa responded to the person who was asking when she thinks it's maybe safe to schedule some events. And we are thinking, again, please don't hold me to it, but we're thinking that it'll certainly be safe to schedule events in July, but that, hopefully it can be sooner than that, but we just don't know.
Mm-hmm. So something else I wanted to talk about is the work that people are doing. There's an aspect of togetherness and helping out and acts of kindness that we've seen across Metuchen. I talked to Dr. Caputo about this last week. We've heard about how Mr. Valera was creating face guards with a 3D printer in town, and also the different things. Yeah. Metuchen delivers, one Metuchen. Could you talk about some of the things, how people can get involved in the community to try to help out others during this time here in the borough?
Right, so that's a great question. We've done a lot. I'll tell you the first two key programs that we really put together in a hurry were the delivery program. The first thing I was concerned about, obviously, when this whole thing went down was how this was going to impact our Main Street. And there's an article in today's Star Ledger, I believe, about virtual main streets and on main streets, online downtowns, or whatever it's called. But the first impact I realized when I started looking at other countries and how they were dealing with this, we were all still working at the time. You were all still in school, but I realized that at some point, if this hits the way some of our experts, respected experts, believe it will, our downtown is going to be shut down the way we know it. And if you look at Metuchen and you think about our economy in this small town, you realize how essential our downtown is to the entire community. It's an economic effect on the entire community, so you want it to thrive. So we put together this program called Metuchen Delivers, and we immediately had our Metuchen Downtown Alliance going to all the business owners and asking them how they might be able to transform their business model, right? Some of them, a pizza place, for example, and I'm not going to use any names, but some pizza places are very easily able to keep up under circumstances like this because they're already designed for limited in-house dining and takeout and delivery, right? Most places, which are pizza places, do that. That's what pizza places mostly do. So they can adjust a little better. Other restaurants, which rely more on the experience of sitting down in that particular restaurant, we're going to have trouble transforming. So we made a really big effort early on to try to talk to them. And I give them a lot of credit, whether they were able to fully adjust or not. Some of them adjusted tremendously well, to the point where some of them are doing almost as well as they would be doing under normal circumstances, which is really incredible. But some of them, we've been basically asking them within a 1 to 3 week period, right? We were basically asking them to make adjustments to their entire business model. And so again, some have adjusted better than others, but we're doing our best to help keep them going. And so we came up with the Metuchen Delivers concept, which was the idea that, all right, here's the deal. You can just because you're stuck inside doesn't mean you can't eat well. And we even filmed a PSA that we had ready for about 2 weeks, knowing that this was going to eventually hit. And we rolled it out on one of the first days that you were all home from school, knowing that when the kids are home, the adults are probably home too, as was true in this case. So that was the first thing we did. We then moved into other programs. Really, one that strikes me as one of the most compassionate programs, and one that ended up serving, I think, as a model for other communities, is that in a town of 15,000 people, we couldn't have that many people over the age of 70. And when we identified those most in need, we realized that the elderly were obviously the largest percentage of those who may have the most needs, and who are not necessarily on social media and are not necessarily business savvy with respect to how you can get groceries delivered and all those kinds of things. So we ended up, and frankly, some of them are alone. So what we realized was having a program that we had Councilwoman Sherry Rose Rubin lead up called You Have a Friend Here. And it was just asking for volunteers. And I don't know how many of your classmates that you know are actually involved in this, but we ended up in a 1 or 2 day period getting 115 volunteers from the borough.
Wow.
We're calling all 1,700 residents over the age of 70 regularly. And that's pretty remarkable, right? Because those calls are really nothing more than a hello and a contact, but that contact can mean so much to people during a time like this. So that's something we're really proud of. We also did a program called Feeding the Front Lines. We're looking at significant needs that we had, and you may be familiar with this, but it's all, you can find all this, by the way, on the Metuchen Downtown Alliance website about Feeding the Front Lines or Metuchen Delivers. If you really want to if you want to volunteer, there may be some slots still for helpers. With respect to the other program, which is You Have a Friend Here, you can contact Councilwoman Sherry Rose Rubin, srrubin@metuchen.com. Reach out to her. But Feeding the Front Lines is intended to accomplish 2 goals. One, you mentioned before the people who get to stay home, right? I mean, hopefully most of your families are home, get to stay home. But there's a lot of people on the front lines who cannot stay home, right? They are the essential workers. They are the first responders. And those people, are the ones that we really want to support during a time like this, because it can't be fun. It can't be easy to come home and worry whether or not you're infecting your family. I was speaking to a superintendent, not our superintendent, another superintendent of schools in another town, who was out delivering lunches. In his town, they have a very high percentage of children who require a free or reduced lunch. He's out delivering lunches every single day with his staff. And every day he's got to pull his car into the garage, strip down, get in the shower, not have any contact with his family, And he wonders, even if he does that, whether he's still putting his family at risk. So those people, we really wanted to try to identify by treating them well right now and giving them food from our downtown. And that accomplishes two goals. One, it helps generate business for the downtown businesses who need it so badly right now. And two, it obviously shows support for those who need it. We've also been working, and one more I'll just mention to you. We have other things too, but I don't want to consume this conversation with just this part of it. And that is that our food pantry through the First Presbyterian Church has been doing tremendous work. They actually are doing quite well financially. Their biggest problem is that there are limits on the amount of food you could buy right now. And so I would ask people watching this, if they want to find a way to really support some of the families in need, both in Metuchen and in their region generally, is if you have an opportunity to buy non-perishable goods yourself while you're either ordering food to be delivered or if you happen to be at the supermarket, make sure you order a couple extra, or order the number that the maximum you're allowed to order if you intend to donate it to the food bank, because they could really use the supplies right now. They're running low on supplies.
Mm-hmm. Really amazing how so many people have been really helping out in all these different facets. He talks about the number of volunteers, which is really astounding, and really talks about like the culture that we have in Metuchen. How everyone is just so willing to be selfless and help out others. So, but another thing that I wanted to get to here, and I'll kind of turn this over to Josh, what he talked about before we went on the air. He wanted to ask you about like the lasting effects that coronavirus is going to have like on Metuchen going forward. So, Josh, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I have a few questions just like everyone else. The first being, like, when this is all over, what kind of, like, changes in Metuchen can we see, both with, like, culturally speaking and with, like, laws and stuff like that?
So law-wise, I don't see that there would be any differences necessarily. I think that I think that we probably, in the future, we were able to find enough supplies to support our emergency management folks eventually. But there was a period of time there in the beginning where we were really concerned about whether we had enough PPE, right, protection equipment for our first responders. We were lucky in that we put an announcement out in our community once again. Eddie responded in a remarkable way, and so we've got more than enough of supplies now, and we're at the point of providing them to the other service providers to keep them safe as well. I don't know that there would be any different laws or ordinances necessarily, but this thing is still unfolding, and the term dynamic comes to mind. It is dynamic, it is changing, and as we move through this, then I have to tell you, and Josh, let me be clear about this. We talked about if any of you are ever in a position to be doing what I'm doing, whether it be as a CEO of a company, or even if you're running your household, or you are whatever the decisions that you're responsible for, okay, you've got to understand that this is really, really uncomfortable for people in leadership right now. This whole scenario is deeply disconcerting because imagine sending a note to your police department that they've got to find any kids who are gathering in town during their spring break week and making sure that they are broken up immediately, right? That would seem to be against the oath that I took as upon becoming mayor, right? The responsibility that we have is to help our community, just to protect the Constitution and keep our community safe. Doing that normally would violate our United States and state constitution. But under the circumstances, under this emergency authority that's been granted, we have to take these steps to protect people's safety. So I think what's important for I think to answer your question, I don't know what laws will change, but I know which ones have to go back. And that is basically, that is everything that we had before this horrible, pandemic struck, because we've got to make sure that we return life to the way it was so that people can enjoy themselves, continue, obviously, appreciate and to make use of their freedoms, because this is not a way to live long term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned, having that trouble with breaking kids up and enforcing social distancing. What are some of the ways that you and the police department have tried to really get everyone on board with this?
Well, the first reports I got were just kids riding their bikes together, and how can you tell if they're 6 feet apart? I mean, at some point, if the kid's weaving near the other one, I mean, you got to be careful with that. It's not a great idea. Most kids do their best to listen to their parents, but you're all kids, and there's a reason that you don't get your driver's licenses until you're a little bit older, and that you're not considered what's called the age of majority, where you can make a decision for yourselves until you become 18. So anyway, what we decided to do is that if the police see you all congregating or doing what you're not supposed to do, they're supposed to just break it up. There are some circumstances where we would have your parents called to make sure that your parents know how serious what you're doing is. I'll tell you that a couple weekends ago we heard that kids were still playing basketball, and that's just not supposed to be happening if it's at a public park. So we had all the basketball hoops removed. That's not fun, right? I got an earful from one of my son's friends about that, who likes to play basketball at the park and was just doing it with his father. But that was something that we needed to do to protect the safety of all of you and us. I'll tell you, people have been very well behaved. So if I can, in anything, convey to you that I deeply appreciate the commitment of the families and the kids in this community to honor what we need to do in the name of Metuchen and our greater community's public safety. You've all done a great job. We had no incidents, all right, for the first few days. We had an incident yesterday, which I learned about. A couple kids were trying to sneak behind an abandoned house. It was promptly broken up by our police department. But you guys have been very well behaved under very difficult circumstances and amazing weather too, which is another piece. It's not as if it's been raining the way it is at this very moment every day during the first couple of days. You've had great weather, so it's extremely tempting to go out and meet up with your friends.
That's true.
I actually have a question because I didn't hear about this order at all. So what are the rules about it? And yeah, I'm just confused. I didn't hear about this.
So there's no congregating. It's not a special rule.
Right.
I sent out a message telephonically, so it was sent out to all homes in the borough, as well as a message on social media that kids during their spring break week, which is not just a week, it's a week plus a day, right? That's not over until the following, I guess this coming Tuesday is when you resume your schoolwork, correct? At home? Mm-hmm. So I just put a note out and said, hey, everyone, I know it's hard, and you may not like me for saying this, but you've got to stay home during spring break. Because, again, our biggest issue has been middle and high school students who are doing what middle and high school students do. But under this particular circumstance, the idea of keeping separate is essential. And so we want to reinforce that.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly it's been tough for us and also for you having to enact these things, but the borough's been doing a great job. You mentioned how you've been incident-free. Yesterday was a little bit of a lapse, but hopefully we can continue, all of us here, since this is the high school, just enforcing to everybody else, obey the social distancing. If you want to be able to have a fun summer, hang out with everyone, just do this now, and hopefully things will take a turn for the better, and if we can flatten the curve. But Mayor Busch, that's going to about wrap things up today. Thank you so much for joining us here, and best of luck with everything else in the borough over these next couple tough weeks.
I want to thank all of you, and I appreciate the work that you did to prepare for this interview. I appreciate that you're spending your spring break still working, if you will, and I appreciate that you are doing your part. It's not easy to be a kid, especially under these circumstances, so thank you to you and your classmates for holding everything together. I'm looking forward to doing another interview in person, and we can kind of wrap this whole thing up when things resume.
Yep, definitely. All right, so for Josh Hyman and Sarah Terracina, I'm Kalegi. This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. We'll see you next time.